What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, the history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, April 9th, 2019, starting to get into the week here. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. There's a lot going on, actually. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. So let's get on into it. But before I get into the news here, I want to talk about a movie. Claire and I made a point last night of watching Vice. Now, this is a movie, it sort of did a fast burn in the theaters, and it's on cable pay-per-view right now. And I expect it'll be in the non-pay-per-view part of cable before too much longer. But this is the story, as they see it, of Dick Cheney and how he basically came to acquire far more power and authority than any other vice president in U.S. history. Now, normally the vice presidency is a nothing job, which they keep reiterating throughout the film. John Adams called it the most boring job in the entire government because all the vice president gets to do is break ties in the Senate and sit around waiting for the president to die. So they're going through it now. Overall, the film covers a lot of the details that we were all watching as we went through that whole George W. Bush getting into Iraq situation. They cover a lot of it, Valerie Plame. In some cases, they're a little inaccurate, but they admit right up front in the movie. They have titles that say, this is based on a true story. Well, at least as far as we can tell, given that Dick Cheney is one of the most secretive people on earth, but we tried. And the film stars Christian Bale as Dick Cheney, Amy Adams as Liz Cheney, and Steve Carell as George W. Bush. And Carell did a really good job, I thought. Well, they all did. Stellar cast. They did a really good cast. But they start out basically where 9/11 has just happened, and the alarms are sounding in the White House, and they're grabbing Dick Cheney and rushing him out of the room and off into the emergency center and so forth and so on. That isn't what exactly happened. And so I dug up this story, and I reposted it to whatreallyhappened.com. And this is a story you can find over at 911truth.org, and it has to do with Secretary Mineta's testimony before the 9/11 Commission, in which he says basically that Dick Cheney was just watching the plane coming in to the Pentagon. And there was a young man who came in and said the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out, the plane is 10 miles out. And the young man said to the vice president, do the orders still stand? And the vice president snapped at the young man saying, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? Now, the orders in question were a do not shoot down. And one of the aspects of 9/11 that was really very strange was that just a month and a half before 9/11, U.S. policy on intercepting aerial threats was changed. Prior to that, any military commander at any air base who detected an air threat coming on in could order their fighters to intercept if they felt it was needed. That got changed, so it required the direct authorization of the Secretary of Defense, who on the morning of 9/11 could not be found. And shortly after 9/11, the policy went back to as it was originally. So they missed that part of it. Now, the movie itself, looking at it from the point of view of a filmmaker, it's a little choppy. And the director was, I don't know if he was just in love with his own creativity, or he just felt there wasn't enough spice in the story, being very dry political stuff. But there are some things that he does in there that are rather gratuitous, and I felt totally unnecessary. The film runs well over 2 hours. I think with a good editor, they could have cut at least half an hour out of there and not damage the story. But I still recommend that you take a look at it and when it comes around, because we were all there. We watched it all happen. We did. And Christian Bale, he even gets the sneer right. Now, the only part of the movie I didn't like was at the very end when Cheney is being interviewed on TV, and all of a sudden he breaks the fourth wall and he looks directly at the motion picture camera and he launches into this thing about how he's never going to apologize. Well, you know something, I shouldn't spoil it all, but basically, you know, he tries to justify his behavior. Now, whether that's Cheney justifying Cheney or the film trying to make Cheney look good, I don't know, but you can decide for yourself. Anyway, so the film is called Vice, and I would give it 7 out of 10, and I'm a tough critic. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So getting into the war zones, the situation over in Libya is very dynamic. Now, as you know, before General Khalifa Haftar started his march on Tripoli, the U.S. withdrew their forces, leaving Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj on his own. And the U.S. forces were literally evac'd out. And at the time, everybody was saying, you know, what's going on? Does the U.S. just want the two governments to kill each other off, and then the U.S. can go back on in with a new installed puppet government? But according to this article from Sputnik News, what's going on here is that even though the United Nations supports Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, basically the international community as a whole will support Khalifa Haftar so long as he resumes production in Libya's vast oil fields, which have been for the most part shut down because of all the turmoil going back to the killing of Muammar Gaddafi. Did you know that Libya at one point was the wealthiest country in Africa? And it has been racked by chaos and turmoil and warring factions ever since this catastrophic intervention to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. You know, but at least Hillary Clinton got a good laugh out of it. Apparently Haftar's LNA, the Libyan National Army, is now heading west. They came out of the east. The east is their stronghold, and they're now heading west. And apparently there were clashes south of Tripoli. So we're going to see what's happening. But right now, there's been a shakeout, so to speak. There are now two rival governments. One based in Tripoli, which is the internationally approved, originally U.S.-supported government, and the other in the eastern city of Tobruk, which is allied with Haftar. So, yeah, this is definitely a civil war, and it's going to get bloody. Now, Haftar's Libyan National Army began their advance on Tripoli last week, striking positions of armed forces loyal to the GNA at the city's defunct international airport on Tuesday after an attack on another airport a day earlier. Apparently, this is just now breaking, where Haftar is accusing Libya's GNA of cooperating with terrorists, which has sort of, I guess, become a thing in this day and age. And have you noticed in the Western media, anytime they talk about Haftar, it's always, he's Russian-backed. He's Russian-backed. He's backed by Russia. There's no information showing that to be true at all. In fact, Haftar used to be supported by the United States. He's a former CIA asset. But when he stops doing what he's told by the United States, well, he must be Russian-backed, because only people who are backed by Russia would refuse to do what the United States government tells them to do. That's just the way it's going to be. But looking at this article out of Global Research, and they do good work, they're saying is that Haftar looks like he genuinely believes he's operating in his homeland's true national interests. And it will, of course, be decades before Libya reaches the standard of living it enjoyed under Muammar Gaddafi. Now, over in Iran, as you've already heard, Donald Trump has designated the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. Well, it's absurd to say that. They're state actors. They're in uniform. They have a chain of command. They're state actors. They don't fit the classic definition of a terrorist, which is somebody operating on their own with bombs trying to effect a socio-political change. But Trump is designating that apparently in an effort to further tighten economic and supply sanctions against Iran. And interestingly enough, this step, led by the Department of State, supposedly realizes the reality that Iran is not only a state sponsor of terrorism, but that the Iran Revolutionary Guards Corps actively participates in, finances, and promotes terrorism as a tool of statecraft. Now, there is a case of the pot calling the kettle black. And by the way, in Iran, they're saying exactly that. What are you talking about? Our soldiers are terrorists. You, the United States, are the biggest state sponsor of terror in the world. We've known for a long time. The U.S. sponsored ISIS. That's a terrorist group. They sponsored the White Helmets. That's a terrorist group. They sponsored Al-Qaeda. That's a terrorist group. Anyway. So another interpretation of what's going on here, this is from Veterans Today. Trump is preparing for war on Iran on Netanyahu's orders. And it's saying it's clear that this move has been made on the direct orders of Benjamin Netanyahu. And the timing is a giveaway. It was one day before Israel goes to the polls, trying to get more votes from the Israeli right wing. We're going to bash on Iran. Vote for Netanyahu and Trump will bash on Iran. And Netanyahu came on out on the campaign trail and said that Trump named the Iranian Guards a terror group at his, meaning Netanyahu's, request. Trump does what I tell him to do. Vote for me. I've got Trump in my back pocket. I've got Trump by his toupee, or whatever it is that Netanyahu is saying. But he's selling the idea that Trump is giving Netanyahu everything that Netanyahu wants, and so far, Trump has done exactly that. And so Netanyahu is campaigning on the idea that if he stays prime minister, the United States will remain fully committed to giving Israel whatever it wants. No matter who has to pay for it, no matter who has to die for it. Now, a lot of people are being very concerned about the fact that designating the Iranian Revolutionary Guards terrorists results in painting a big red target on the U.S. troops currently stationed in Iraq. And the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps is sort of like the U.S. National Guard. It isn't the formal army, but it is an adjunct to it. Now, if the U.S. has a problem with the Iranian Corps actions, they should accuse the Iranian government of war crimes. States commit war crimes. There are international laws and institutions for dealing with war crimes. But the practical side of the issue is that Iraqi Shiite militias close to the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps are essentially the hosts and protectors of some, well, now it's 10,000 U.S. troops in Iraq. And that may complicate the situation. Now, Iran, proving that they are cool under pressure and still have a sense of humor, have now designated U.S. CENTCOM as a terror organization. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Paul in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mr. Rivero. On the Drudge Report just now, there's an article that says that Boise residents sue Air Force over proposed training above Idaho cities. Now, the alarm bell that goes off is all of our police and military are being trained by the Israelis. Talk to me.
Well, what they're doing is they're practicing for urban warfare, and because the countries were planning on invading are not willing to allow a dress rehearsal on their territory, they're doing the training here in the United States of America. And it has upset a lot of people. I remember, I think it was about a month ago, they were flying these helicopters between the skyscrapers in Los Angeles. There'd been no advance warning. People got very upset about it. And yeah, it's very unnerving to people. And it does provide a realistic urban environment for the military to train in. The other aspect of it is, I think they're trying to get the American people used to the idea that war is coming. Paul, you there? Okay, we lost him. Alrighty, getting on back to the war zones here. Now, Iran has once again confirmed that the U.S. supports ISIS, which, thank you, Iran. We already knew that, known it for quite some time. And Iran is now asking Iraq once again to expel all U.S. forces from Iraq as soon as possible. Easier said than done. Just ask Syria. And the issue is, you know, supposedly the U.S. and Iraq are friends, but Iraq is very nervous about all these armed forces on their soil. And they would like them to leave, but the U.S. doesn't show any signs of leaving. So what's Iraq going to do? Restart the war all over again? Now, what I want to know is, where's Muqtada al-Sadr in all of this? Because he had made a statement a while back that if the U.S. forces stayed beyond the original agreement to leave, there had been a signed agreement saying U.S. forces will leave by this date. That date has come and gone a long time ago. And the U.S. forces are still there. Muqtada al-Sadr basically said any U.S. forces in Iraq after that date when they're supposed to be out, they are a legitimate target. So far, we haven't heard or seen anything from him, but that's another wild card out there in the hinterland. Talking yesterday about this story where the neocons are saying they want to use Turkey to ignite a regional war. And obviously for a regional war, they want U.S. forces, your kids, all over the region. Yesterday, we talked about this incident in Yemen in which there was a warehouse that exploded right next to a schoolyard, killing 11 civilians, including a lot of children. And it was presumed to be a Saudi airstrike. Now, Saudi Arabia is not shy about saying, yes, we bombed this, we bombed that. But unusually, in this case, the Saudis are saying, no, we didn't have anything to do with this. So this has prompted the United Nations to call for a probe of this warehouse explosion to see exactly what happened and how it got hit, or if, alternatively, there was something inside that just exploded. So it's being treated as some mysterious explosion out of nowhere. And the Saudis have previously lied about responsibility. They want to know what's going on. 'Tis the season for elections. They're all over the place here. And Turkey just had their local elections. And they haven't gone too well for President Erdogan. In fact, his party lost in the Istanbul vote, which his career started as the mayor of Istanbul. And so losing that city was quite a political blow. I think he wants a do-over. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Terry in Oregon. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just look for Israel to go hog wild over the next year and a half, just in case Trump doesn't get a second term. You know, they know they can get away with anything. Look for some false flags to get into Lebanon. And as a matter of fact, I just heard where Christopher Boland strongly suspects that the Marines that were attacked in Beirut with the bomb, that was an Israeli false flag. He doesn't have any proof, but he says he strongly suspects it.
Yeah,
But
I've seen indications of that myself. And of course, what did the United States do? 24 hours later, they invaded Grenada to pull the media's attention off of what was one of the most humiliating failures of military security in American history.
Yeah, except that it kind of backfired on the false flaggers because Reagan just pulled all the troops out. He didn't go crazy with the retaliation for that like they expected he would.
Well, they still got Reagan. They tricked him with that fake radio transmitter and got him to bomb Gaddafi. They missed Gaddafi, and they got his 5-year-old daughter.
Right. So, but look for troops going into Lebanon, the southern part, and also the eastern border. And, it's all a big game. Just look for all kinds of things happening in the next year and a half while he still got Trump. That's all I had, Mike. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. Yeah, it is a very, very complex situation. And it's just going to take one hothead, one mistake for it to really spiral out of control here. Okay, now, getting on back to Turkey. The U.S. has halted delivery of equipment related to the F-35 to Turkey as part of this little tiff over Erdogan's plans to move forward with buying the Russian S-400 air defense system over its U.S. almost, not quite, but more expensive equivalent. And since Erdogan is still intractable on that, Vice President Mike Pence is now threatening Turkey's future role in the NATO alliance, saying it's time to choose between remaining a NATO member or buying the Russian S-400. Here is my question. Does the United States, all on its own, have the authority to boot Turkey out of NATO? Or is it an empty threat? And with Mike Pence going around making all these threats and everything, and having watched that movie last night, Vice, Pence is starting to remind me a little bit of Dick Cheney. Over in Syria, the situation is, at the moment, relatively stable. There are some limited ISIS attacks on the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces. That's over on the eastern bank of the Euphrates. And there are ceasefire violations in the Idlib demilitarized zone. So over the last couple of days, pro-militant sources are claiming that the Syrian Arab Army and even the Russian aerospace forces have delivered strikes on so-called opposition targets in northern Hama and southern Idlib. These seem to be propaganda exaggerations, but there are real attacks going on both sides. Meanwhile, there are indications that the United States and Israel are preparing for a coordinated campaign against Iranian forces stationed inside Syria that may also be the reason for those 10,000 combat troops, U.S. combat troops in Iraq at the edge of the border. And of course, it basically amounts to it's going to be another invasion of Syria. And Israel and the U.S. are going to say, Assad, this has nothing to do with you. We're going after the Iranians. And of course, Assad is going to remember when the United States said, stay out of this, Assad, we're going after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And it turned out to be a big lie. But apparently, a little bit of good news. The Syrian Arab Army and the Russian forces have finally started evacuation of civilians from the Al-Rukban refugee camp through opened humanitarian corridors. Apparently, the U.S. backed down, just keeping them locked up. It was becoming too obvious that the U.S. wanted to keep all those refugees there as a pretext to keep their military forces on the Baghdad-Damascus highway in the area of Al-Tanf. However, even if the Rukban camp is emptied, doesn't mean the U.S. is going to leave. The U.S. seems to have this attitude. Here we are, and here we stay. Guess too many of our military command have been reading Frank Herbert's Dune. All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take some phone calls now. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, did you hear anything about an F-35 visiting Davy Jones' locker?
Yes, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, and I'm sure Boeing is, breathing a sigh of relief and saying, "Oh, good, now it's Lockheed Martin's turn."
I didn't know Boeing made like boats.
Well, they may have. Well, we're talking Lockheed Martin makes the F-35. They may have made a submarine.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, I don't know if you heard this, but Benny Gantz, like they're saying he won. Like that's just what the exit polls are showing. Like
well,
he won a lot of
there's
seats.
a couple of different exit polls, and right now they're neck and neck, and everybody is saying it's too close to call. But yeah, it does look like he's ahead by enough seats to where Netanyahu may no longer be prime minister, which I think would be good. Not that Benny Gantz is going to be any easier on the Palestinians, but at least Netanyahu gets to deal with his corruption charges, without any distractions.
And then before I let you go, I'm just going to mention with Trump again, it seems like it's make Israel great again because, Mike, he got rid of these two people in his administration because they weren't doing anything with the border. Now, if we give him a week and he doesn't do anything, then it's pretty much over with him, right? Because now if he puts new people in, nothing gets done, then you know it's him.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Mike. Have a good rest of the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Layla in Canada. Aloha, Layla. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
This is Jim in Chicago.
All right, we'll take Jim in Chicago, and then we'll go to Layla after that. I'm not sure what happened. Anyway, Jim, what's on your mind?
A couple things. Yesterday, Donald Trump, he decides to go after the Iranian Red Guard, and also he went after the Cuban Baseball League, and this is kind of ironic because back in 1995, he sent people down to Cuba because he wanted to build a hotel and a casino down there, and the United States government, I guess they fined him, so that was stopped, and that's something he was not very happy about. And then I read in the paper today and also yesterday where in 2016, Donald Trump was sending money, laundering money to the Iranian Red Guard because he was trying to build a hotel in Azerbaijan. Did you read that story?
Yes.
Yeah, so what do you think of that?
Well, I think, obviously the Trump organization is no longer directly under the control of Donald Trump. It's under the control of his family. And I think they're just trying to look at business opportunities. Right now, with all the scrutiny that Donald Trump is under from the Democrats, I don't think they're going to take the chance on doing anything necessarily underhanded. So I could be wrong on that, but I think, it'd probably be better if we stay focused. And first of all, it's not the Iranian Red Guard, it's the Iranian Republican Guard. And what Trump blocked was Major League Baseball, which up until now was allowed to recruit and hire Cuban baseball players because those Cubans know how to play baseball. They do it a lot. They grow up with it, and they are absolutely amazing. And Major League Baseball really likes having them on their teams. That, unfortunately, is now going to go away. And again, I don't think it's Trump's revenge against Cuba for the failure of that hotel deal, because after all, that was blocked by the U.S. government. But it may be a continuation of Trump's attempt to start isolating Cuba and pay back for its support of Venezuela.
Well, that's a possibility. Did you hear what John Bolton said, though, regarding the situation with the Cuban baseball players? He stated, well, this is a way of stopping human trafficking.
Human trafficking. you know, what, 5 or 6 Cuban ball players joining the major league teams, and that's human trafficking. I mean, for one thing, these are the people we should be allowing into our country. They're skilled, they're wanted, they're good for the economy. You know, if Bolton's worried about, you know, human trafficking, he should be down there in Arizona and Texas on that border. I mean, Bolton, I think it's time to take a drug test. That's just idiotic of him to say.
Right. Well, Mike, I'm going to let you go. You take care.
Okay, thanks an awful lot. And this time, for sure, we're going to Layla in Canada. Layla, aloha. Sorry about the earlier goof. What's on your mind?
That's okay. I was wondering if you... I've never heard the name John McLaughlin as a prominent advisor and pollster to Trump in 2016, but apparently he's been Netanyahu's pollster and advisor, and he's done that for many global conservative parties. And he's using the same tactics of, you know, what they did was the Arabs are voting in droves, get out there and vote. And of course, the Arab turnout is barely around 50% of the eligible Arab voters. But it's very close, and I don't know, it's 37 for Gantz to 35 for Netanyahu. And I don't know if that's percentage points or seats. But ultimately, I think it's Reuven Rivlin, isn't it, who actually says who's going to form the next government?
Well, it depends, because if Gantz wins the majority of seats, it doesn't prevent Netanyahu from trying to go to other non-aligned seats and form a coalition to regain the prime ministership, which would make it a fourth term, which is like history making.
Well, actually, I think I counted there's something like 12 parties other than Kahol Lavan, which is Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid and Likud. There are 12 other parties that were running for them on the far left as considered Arab parties. So yes, it's still entirely likely, even though it's so close, that Netanyahu is going to form the next government. If Gantz does, I suspect he will fall very quickly. His government will fall because of Netanyahu's underhanded techniques and his control of the institutions. And the reason I'm so concerned with what happens in Israel is because I look at Israel as the chessboard for wars around the world. And I think we all have to start looking at Israel in that way. It's not simply what one country one artificially created country is doing to those that it occupies, the Palestinians. I think we're being distracted by that. We've got to look at Israel as the global Zionist movement, the fulfillment of the protocols. And we all know what we're talking about when we talk about the protocols, because they've all come true. Anyone who was ever able to get a copy of the protocols of the leaders of the elders or the elders of Zion, everything that was stated in there as the objective in this purportedly false record is coming true. And it's all going to be enacted, has been enacted out of Israel. But I was stunned that John McLaughlin, was also the pollster for people like Jeb Bush.
Yes.
So he also ran Trump's primary. So if anyone was able to advise Trump on calling Jeb Bush low energy, who was his strongest opponent, it was probably McLaughlin, having worked with Jeb Bush. Anyway, I will let you go. It is just, you know, we've got to keep an eye on whatever is happening around the world. And by the way, Putin also helped Netanyahu by meeting with him 5 days before the election.
Yes.
Because Putin is well liked by the Russian voters in Israel. So it's not, you know, this Putin guy is another one who's playing both sides of the fence. Anyway, I'll let you go. All
right. Well, thanks an awful lot, Layla. And I would rather say that Putin isn't playing both sides of the fence. He's trying to basically be above the partisanship, and he's trying to just be nice with everybody up to the point where it's time to not be nice. And I think Putin genuinely is trying to avoid that time. So we'll see what's going to happen over there in Israel. Of course, if Benny Gantz wins the majority of seats in the election, he can also go to those other 12 political parties and say, form a coalition with me. So this thing may not be over. And we could even see this thing lead up to more wet work like we saw with Itzhak Rabin all those years ago. Okay, now getting on back to the war zones. Okay, the U.S. invaded Iraq. They annoyed 60% of the Shiite population who fought back, and they've blamed Iran for killing 608 U.S. troops. And it's a big talking point. This was designed for Special Envoy Brian Hook to give hawkish speeches on Iran. The briefing estimated that Iran was responsible for the deaths of 608 U.S. troops during the Iraq War. Notice they didn't say Iran killed those troops, merely that it was responsible. And this was an upward revision from a 2015 estimate of 500. The most accurate estimate, of course, would be 0, because despite years of anti-Iran rhetoric, the United States has never conclusively pinned a single death on the Iranian government or its forces. But then we know with this government, truth just absolutely does not matter. And that was something else that came through on that movie Vice, along with the heavy use of focus groups. So we're a very loud bird outside the window here. So the propaganda is still going on. But that's something that I've come to understand over these last 25 years. The government is totally unconcerned with truth. They're going to say or show you whatever they think will get you to do what they want. Support a war in Iraq, support a war in Syria, support a war in Afghanistan, support a war in Australia, support a war in who knows where. We got a good demonstration of that over the last 2 years with this Trump-Russia collusion story, for which nobody has apologized and nobody has been fired. Because that's how you are controlled. You are lied to. We live in a real life version of the Matrix, where everything presented to us in newspapers, radio news, TV news, it is an illusion to control us. So anyway, as of the last time I checked in with CNN, Gantz is ahead, and apparently an exit poll conducted by Israel's Channel 12 has Likud Party with 33 seats and Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party with 37 seats. And I can already hear Bibi Netanyahu out there screaming, Russian interference, it's Russian interference, Russia interfered with our elections. So Netanyahu was really out there pounding the pavement at the last minute, actually went down to the beaches to try and get the people lying on the beaches to get up and go vote. And as Layla mentioned, that idea of the Arabs are going to vote in droves, that one fell apart. Arab turnout is at a record low. Some people are saying it's simply because the Arab voters are completely disenchanted with the Israeli government. The other part is the fact that apparently the Likud put 1,200 hidden cameras in the Arab polling sites and then let the word get on out. That may have scared a lot of Arabs and convinced them to stay home. All righty. Over in the West Bank, there's this controversial Israeli settler activist, Daniella Weiss, and in an interview with Haaretz said that her vision of a future Israel following the impending Israeli annexation of the West Bank includes parts of Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Iraq, and Iran. So remember what we said about Eretz Israel. And she went on to say that this future greater Israel is not extreme, but it's a basic Jewish approach, and it's the only way to continue Zionism. And then we'll take a little bit more of that country, and a little bit more of that country, and a little bit more of that country. Now, the rhetoric between Israel and Gaza continues to escalate the moment the ceasefire seems to be holding. But Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar has promised that if Israel launches another attack on Gaza, Hamas will force Israel to evacuate not only the settlements near the Gaza border, but some of its main cities, such as Ashdod, Ashkelon, Negev, and Tel Aviv. And Sinwar said, "We are 10 times stronger than we were in 2014, which was the previous Israeli-Gaza conflict." I don't know, it sounds a little braggadocio to me. Sinwar noted that Israel will only suffer if the war is imposed against the Gaza Strip. He promised that in this case, Hamas would act as shield and sword to the inhabitants of the region. And of course, he's responding to the fact that Israel has repeatedly bombarded Hamas positions in Gaza in response to flaming balloons and kites and occasional missile launches, which may or may not have come from Gaza. So apparently, despite recent ceasefire understandings, the conflict has started to crank on up yet again. Alrighty. Up in Kosovo, and I know this is out on a tangent here, but I felt this was important to get on in here. Kosovo's Prime Minister Ramush Haradinaj said that his government's policies serve U.S. interests against Serbia and Russia, and that he is only following Washington's orders. The Albanian people in all of our lands are part of what America is leading. Throughout the global plan, we are together. I am a soldier of America on the ground. I only carry out the orders, the premier said. This was in the Albanian language, Gazetica Blik. All right, we got to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Over in the Sudan, things have really been kicking up. There have been protests for a while now. Now it's turning into actual conflict. Yesterday, we reported on how some of the protesters had actually confronted some of the police and actually grabbed their weapons and opened fire. So now the big question is, whose side are Sudan's armed forces going to come down on? Will the army side with the people or with the regime? That will decide what's going to happen. So apparently the protesters are staging a sit-in within the headquarters of the armed forces in central Khartoum, demanding that the military intervene in support of this 4-month-long popular uprising. So much upset in the world. I wonder if this is another U.S.-sponsored covert overthrow. Alrighty, over in Venezuela, China is now starting to talk tough, and it takes the United States to task, basically saying, no, this is not your backyard. And we have as much right to be here in South America as you do to be in, well, for example, Syria, except, of course, we're here by invitation. And so China is defending Russia's deployment of troops, and to sort of punctuate the matter, Chinese military personnel have now arrived in Venezuela over this last weekend. That is a watershed moment. So the big question is, does the United States want to risk war with both Russia and China in order to stage a military intervention in Venezuela, just to get that Maduro out and make sure Venezuela's oil is sold only for the US dollar? And maybe that's the reason why Pat Robertson, who is supposed to be a Christian and thou shalt not kill, and he's apparently out on his show saying it's time for a drone strike against Maduro. Well, Pat, you can find him. I mean, I imagine that Maduro, because remember, a couple of months ago, somebody tried to assassinate Maduro with a pair of exploding drones. So I think Maduro's probably keeping his exact location pretty much a secret here. Meanwhile, Sergei Lavrov is saying that Venezuela is not going to become a second Syria, and that from his conversations that he's had with other governments in South America, that the majority of them will not back a military invasion. So Juan Guaido is still out there saying, I'm the president, I'm the president, I'm the president. People are attacking him. What a mess here. Now, here's an interesting development. China has opened a new border crossing with North Korea in Jilin province. And it's a highway port, meaning it's not just a little gate people can go back and forth. It's a commerce barrier. And that is a significant statement of cooperation between China and North Korea. May even be part, eventually, of the One Belt, One Road. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Okay, so what part of the South China Sea is the United States not getting? Because apparently, not having received enough of a reaction from China over these various Aegis ships and everything sailing in and around what China claims is their territory, the United States has sailed the USS Wasp amphibious assault ship near areas claimed by Beijing. And the Wasp is carrying something like 10 F-35s. So it is a huge display of power. And apparently the Japan Times tried to contact a military spokeswoman who would not confirm or deny the Wasp's presence near the collection of outcroppings, saying it's force protection and security. But apparently the Wasp has been training with Philippine Navy ships in Subic Bay and in international waters of the South China Sea for several days. Okay. Up in North Korea, or getting back to North Korea, little observation. We keep hearing about the possibility we're going to go on in, we're going to have another Korean War. We didn't do too well in the last one. Okay? In July of 1950, North Korea defeated the United States Army. Okay, the same army that 6 years before had managed to stop the Panzer divisions at the Battle of the Bulge. But in July of 1950, the army was a speed bump. They only managed to delay the North Korean advance for a few hours. So we might want to be careful. They know the terrain. They've got the home court advantage. Do you realize, or I hope that Trump realizes, or that somebody in the command structure realizes, that if all of these potential wars were to go live, we don't have enough people. They would have to activate the draft, and that would anger the American people. We're running out of stockpiles. We're running out of money. The nation's being bankrupted. Now, as I mentioned before, the U.S. is sailing this USS Wasp with all these F-35s all over its deck through these disputed waters in a show of force against China. Maybe a case of very bad timing, because apparently a Japanese F-35 stealth fighter unexpectedly disappeared from radar while on a training mission. It simply disappeared, and not in the way it's supposed to. Now, obviously, stealth aircraft carry radar transponders so that they can, when they need to be visible to radar below. This one simply vanished. There were no calls from the pilots. It simply disappeared. And there's a scramble on to try and find the remains of the aircraft and the pilot, mostly because the Chinese and Russians have a lot of ships in the area, and they could find it first. And that would be a major blow for the United States military. Now, China and Russia might not be able to recreate the F-35, and frankly, given all of its problems, they probably wouldn't want to. But there's a lot of technology in there that they could adapt to their existing frontline aircraft that would definitely change the equations. So everybody's out there looking for that. Remember when that F-117 got shot down over Kosovo? And parts of it were immediately broken off and sent off to Russia and China. And now they know how to get around stealth technology. There was that Russian pilot a while ago, got radar lock on an F-22. There's serious concern that the S-400 can actually detect an F-35. This would make the problem that much worse. And proving that the military really are not as smooth as, well, for example, Top Gun makes them out to be. Apparently, last January, there was an incident where a Dutch F-16 fighter was taking part in training, firing off its Vulcan minigun, which fires 6,000 rounds a minute. You know, it sounds like ripping burlap. And was turning and burning, and somehow literally ran into its own shells. It shot itself. Now, it didn't crash. It had to make an emergency landing, but there was one bullet hole in the body of the plane. Other bullet fragments ended up inside the engine. That can be a big, big problem. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to go to the phones to talk to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. You're looking a lot better today. You're holding up well, my brother.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your shows what really happened. I heard this report. This lady got smashed, what she thought was a mosquito in Texas, and got some kind of disease and died the next day later. And I thought, this is just kind of poisoning the well type thing. They ain't that advanced. But then I watched a video on CNBC, and they were talking about they have this technology already. Do you think that this is that advanced, and how easy would it be for them to have one of these nano mosquitoes to fly in on Trump's neck? So that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
Well, it's the thing. It's the stuff of science fiction. I mean, there's a show that Claire and I like called Elementary, and they even had an episode there where they had nanobot mosquitoes as assassination weapons. The limiting factor is, of course, the power supply, and they have managed to make these nano insects very, very small, but you still can't confuse them for a real live insect. And so I don't know what happened to this woman in Texas. I know that there have been some CGI faked nano mosquitoes out there on YouTube. And no doubt with 3D printing, they can make something mosquito-sized. The big issue is giving it enough power to go more than a few feet.
All right, well, that's a good answer. I think there's maybe a little more to this, but if it, how Moore's law. I mean, this stuff can advance pretty quickly, and that's. I mean, a fly can come in and land on anybody, a politician, whatever, inject some kind of nano poison, and bye bye, right?
Well, ultimately, theoretically, it might be able to happen. But again, the power supply is going to be an issue. There may be improvements in the batteries. They may be able to convert the wings to solar cells. If they're operating outside, that would give them a little bit more range. The other part of it, though, is that in order to work and be piloted and hit its target, the nanobot has to be transmitting video back to its operator. And that's going to use a lot of electricity, probably even more than the actual flying does.
Yeah, I think that's you're the perfect guy to answer this, but I sometimes I wonder if they're not a lot more advanced than we think they are.
Well, traditionally, the United States military likes to keep itself 10 to 20 years ahead of the civilian market. And, certainly after World War II, a lot of amazing things were released to the general public. DARPA would be the group that would know about what's going on. And but again, just from an engineering point of view, I see power density and communications navigation as the two big limiting factors in making something truly insect-sized.
Okay, Mike, thanks a lot. I appreciate your insight.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And okay, let's talk about our domestic politics here. There is clearly no love lost between Nancy Pelosi and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And Alexandria makes no bones about the fact she has all these people following her on Twitter. I don't know if anybody's checked to see how many of them are real or fake. But she's out there saying, I'm the star of Twitter. And Pelosi came on out and said that you can have all the Twitter followers you want, but what matters are the votes on the floor. And Pelosi is absolutely right on that one. I just don't understand how Ocasio-Cortez got to be where she is, because she's not impressive. Now, do you remember last year there were these 7 anti-Trump users who sued over the fact that they'd been blocked by the president from his official Twitter account? And this judge in New York ruled Trump did not have the power to block others on social media, as his account had become a designated public forum, meaning he's a public figure, and he couldn't block anybody. Well, it turns out Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has just done exactly the same thing, because, as you know, she had this controversy last week where she was speaking before Al Sharpton's National Action Network, and the video clip went on Twitter, and people started attacking her on Twitter, and she started blocking them. Now, the Democrats aren't making a big stink about it the way they did in the case of Donald Trump. But yes, she's basically doing what got Trump all that criticism there. By the way, I understand that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is planning a trip to Naboo to speak to the Gungans, and she's taking voice coaching lessons from Jar Jar Binks. Speaking of Al Sharpton, you're going to love this one. There's this website called The Smoking Gun, and it is a website that has, over the years, ferreted out documents that reveal quite a bit of very embarrassing information. And their latest report, published yesterday, claims that Al Sharpton is a former FBI informant who regularly interacted with members of 4 of New York City's 5 organized crime families, specifically leaders of the Genovese family, and he secretly recorded their conversations. So if Al Sharpton goes missing mysteriously in the next few days, start dragging the East River. Over at CNN, Ana Navarro came on out with a tweet. You can see the Trump derangement syndrome is out there. And now that this whole Robert Mueller investigation collusion has gone pop like a bubble, they're just out there just trying to say anything about Trump that's going to damage him. So anyway, over at CNN, their pet Republican and virulent anti-Trumper Ana Navarro issued a Twitter post saying that Trump had called all illegal immigrants animals. No, he didn't. It never happened. They're basically sort of mutating a single incident where he described the MS-13 gang members as animals. And if you know anything about MS-13, that is not an inappropriate comment. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I saw your article on the Al Sharpton being an FBI informant. As a matter of fact, you may have forgotten it, but you told us years ago that was going on. But that he was.
Well, I've only been doing this 25 years, and I got an old man's memory, so.
Well, you were on it. You were on it years back, and it's true. It's been a long time that it's common knowledge. But what I wanted to broach with you is also another one, which you also talked about, and that is that another FBI informant, it was found, who admitted to it when they were doing the investigation on whether or not Obama was selling his Senate seat. Do you remember that?
Yes.
When he and that was Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr.
Yes.
A sitting congressman admitted that he was an FBI informant. So not only do we have Al Sharpton and this as a black leader, but we have a sitting U.S. congressman as an FBI informant. He admitted to it, and what does that say about Mueller and the FBI and how off the reservation they have been for a long, long time?
Well, it goes back way before Mueller and the FBI. I mean, it goes back to COINTELPRO back in the 1960s. The FBI, and for that matter, police departments have never hesitated to use informants. And it's very well organized. And to this day, the FBI maintains multiple informants on every college campus to basically keep an eye on any students who seem to be straying away from the straight and narrow. And certainly they were targeting the anti-war movement, the early feminists, the Native Americans, and the FBI was doing everything they could to disrupt them, including stunts like the Black Panther coloring book. This is what the FBI is really all about. Now, Jesse Jackson Jr., the fact that he was an informant, people are going to shrug that off. But, you know, Al Sharpton being an informant and ratting on the mob, that is a little more high profile and dangerous.
Yeah, but Mike, it illustrates what this illustrates, because it goes back, as you know, with J. Edgar Hoover, the Kennedys, and every president before him he was trying to influence. But just how heinous the FBI is, and how it has never stopped. And think about how the FBI, who's already we know was surveilling Trump, surveilling Bernie Sanders, just how far off the reservation they are, and how the secret police in this country, which is what the FBI is, are so politicized that they're determining, you know, who's winning elections, who gets impeached, who doesn't get impeached, and by the way, remember that they have access to all the phone intercepts as well. So they are completely dirty, and frankly, I'm saying it right here, FBI, CIA should all be busted up and done away with.
Well, John F. Kennedy said the same thing. He wanted to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and cast them to the wind, and unfortunately he lost that one.
He did. All right, that's it for me, Mike, but thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot.
Can I do one more thing?
Say again?
Can I do one more?
Yeah.
Can I say one more thing? You were talking about earlier about the Korean thing, about a speed bump, Panzers, stop the Panzers in the Battle of Balls. I've been in Korea several times and walked the area where they first encountered, it was Task Force Smith in June of 1950, was a battalion infantry task force that ran into the spearhead of the North Koreans in I think of June 1950. And they had no armor, Mike. They were soft occupation troops from the 24th Infantry Division that had been in Japan, you know, with the geisha girls and doing nothing. And they were thrown in front of the pretty hard North Korean spearheads, under strength, no anti-tank stuff at all. And T-34s ran right over them. Bazookas at that time, the 2.75-inch rocket bazooka would not penetrate a T-34. They just got run over. Later on, you know, the U.S. Army handled the North Koreans pretty well. But the other point is the North Koreans, they're not attacking anybody. They're a hell of a defensive force. They're dug in, like I think I said before, like the Japanese were dug in on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. But if they ever got onto a road in an attack, they'd be shot off the road, and they're not configured. Our Air Force would just decimate them, and they're not even configured for that. They're configured like the Japanese on Iwo Jima.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, obviously military command erred in sending an obviously inferior force up against the North Koreans. But in the long run, we never won that war. Technically, it's still ongoing. There's just a ceasefire. Okay, so Peter, thanks an awful lot. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, I want to start this part of our beg with a heartfelt thank you to everybody who has donated and continues to donate, and especially those who donate just a little bit every single month, because that's what allows Republic Broadcasting to keep on going. You've been hearing what's going on in the world. You can see it. This is a very, very dark time. And we talk about all the various conflicts that are out there, but the biggest one is the war between the lies and the truth. And I think it was Senator Hiram Johnson who said, truth is the first casualty of war. Or as George W. Bush said, we've got to catapult the propaganda forward. We've got to catapult the propaganda forward. And that's it. The government, the corporate media, they lie to you to get you to do what they want. They're not lying to make your life better. They're not lying to you to make anything easier for you. They see you just as tools. They want your money. They want your children. They want your obedience. They want your votes. And they will say whatever it takes. Meanwhile, you have out here the independent media, which has sprung up because of the betrayal of the corporate media, which has just fallen since the days of, well, the Pentagon Papers or Watergate. They don't do that kind of stuff anymore. They have to leave it to WikiLeaks. So that's how important we are here. And we have no big supporters. We have no angels. We have no foundations. We have no corporate sponsors. Without you, Republic Broadcasting and what really happened will vanish. That is just the truth. So again, thank you for everybody who's donated, and for those who care to donate again or for the first time. The postal address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas 78664. The phone number where you can call in a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And the network thanks you, and I thank you. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Philip in Virginia. And Philip, I may have to take you through the next commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hello, I'm Mike. Yeah, on the last segment, you brought up AOC.
Yes.
And Alexandria Ocasio Chavez.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if anything's further developing about her campaign finance problem. I haven't heard anything about that, any follow-up, but I would like to see something done about that. But you were wondering about where she came from, and I don't know if you've seen a really great mini documentary about her, and not only her, the same groups that got her elected also were able to get, I think, 5 other people in the midterms elected as well through their strategy and tactics that they have reverted to. They're actually of subversive organizations, like 3 or 4 different non-government or what do they call them? Nonprofit organizations.
Yes.
But anyway, did you see a video of the brains behind AOC?
No, I didn't catch that one.
You need to see it. What would you call that? Her being an enigma, or I'm not sure if that's the right term, but
no, that's not the right term here. I mean, from where I'm sitting, she's I'm sorry, she's a goof. And I know she's got handlers behind her who are trying to guide her career, and they see her as the next media darling of the Democratic Party. But every time she opens her mouth, she's embarrassing herself, and I don't think she's going to last. We have a story a little further on down where apparently the reason she won her seat was more due to the incompetence of her opponent than to her skills, because she just doesn't seem to have any. And I think right now she's on this rush where she thinks she won her seat through merit, and it's gone to her head. And that's why she's out there behaving the way that she is. But somebody needs to, give her an ice bucket challenge and say, look, you got to calm on down. You're just a first-term congresswoman, and you've got to tone it down a little bit if you expect to have any longevity.
Well, the thing about her and a few other of her ilk, like Talib and Omar, and there was some other anti-Trump woman that got elected.
Hold that thought right there. Philip, hold that thought right there. These people, anti-Trumpers who got elected. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Philip in Virginia. And Philip, during the commercial break, I did a quick search, and it appears that complaint filed against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez by this conservative group is not going anywhere. Nobody seems to have picked up on it. AOC's people are saying they basically have tried to frame the relationship between all these players in the worst possible way, but it doesn't look like anything's happening with that. So you were talking about how all these newcomers got elected to the House of Representatives, including Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one other woman who apparently hates Donald Trump. Can you just sort of pick it up from there?
Yes, the video is called "The Brains Behind AOC" by a fellow. He calls himself Mr. Reagan. I don't know if that's his name or if it's a shtick or whatever, but it's really informative. The first one is 23 minutes long, and he subsequently put another one out that's even more troubling, and that one's about 19 minutes. "The Brains Behind AOC Part 2. So if you come across those, I think it would answer a lot of questions about, where these people are coming from, because they're, like you mentioned, they're not qualified. These people are bird brains. They're just getting their talking points from these hardcore leftist organizations, and they're essentially trying to take over the government through the democratic process. So they definitely need to be kept an eye on, and they need to be exposed, and they're a bunch of hypocrite frauds, and we're already seeing that with her, with the Twitter thing about how Trump was people came against Trump for blocking people, and now AOC doing the same thing that he did, and, where's the outrage for that, I mean, these people are hypocrites.
Yes. They're politicians. They attack their enemies and they protect their friends.
Yep. And let me just say something about our fundraising efforts here, for RBN and your program and everything. I want to put out a challenge, a money bomb, so to speak. The check is in the mail, Mike. I'm pledging $100 to you and RBN, and I'm going to get that out tomorrow. I'm off tomorrow. I know I'm off. I'm going to get that out to you guys, and I request all the other people out there that are concerned about the real media, the real news, not the fake stuff coming from the MSN, the massive satanic misdirection out there. And let's mobilize and let's get these, take care of these bills that we don't have the luxury of these truth haters out here getting funded by these billionaires like Steyer and Soros.
Yes.
Okay, bud.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good day to you, Michael. Michael, what's going on here is I keep watching this media. I don't know if you're familiar with One American News Network. They just showed every hour on the hour they show what the immigration cost is and how many illegals are here. It's 26 million, according to OAN. It's $72 billion a year that's cost already for these illegals. I think it was it's just astronomical numbers that OAN shows every hour on the hour about immigration. But here's what I want to talk about, Michael. You got a lot of Cubans now sneaking in from Cuba into Mexico to try to come up to that border. And because you remember, they ended a wet foot, dry foot. So now a lot of these communist Cubans that don't have a pot to be in, they all want to get to the United States. Michael, I don't know if you're aware of this, but every Cuban in Cuba, there's only 2 of them that own a car. So
wait a minute. I have to call you on that one.
Go ahead.
Because
Go ahead.
There's almost.
I don't know how you're going to comment, Michael. I was in Cuba about 8 months ago, and I can tell you, for every 100 males in that island, only 2 of them will have a car. Okay, I can vouch for that, Michael.
All right.
Okay, so I know what's going on in Cuba. Believe me, Michael. Trust me on that. Okay, I'm going to repeat. Out of 100 males in that island, for every 100 males you got over there, I'll give you a benefit of the doubt. Maybe 3 of them own a car. 97 of them wouldn't own a car. Their modus operandi is either a horse and a buggy, or they have buses. They do have these makeshift buses they ride around for all the cities. But the point I'm trying to bring out is the same with these Central Americans. They don't have nothing, so they're all coming here, Michael. It's costing $74,000 from what I saw in OAN per head per year for every illegal. Now, I don't know who's paying for all this insanity, but these people who are coming here do not speak English. They should be going to South America where they have Argentina, Bolivia, and all these other countries. They're coming here for the free ride, the free handout, the Section 8, the food, and every other thing that they don't have over there. We are being invaded. Michael, my point of reason I'm calling you is, why are these Democrats not calling out the truth? They see it on One American News. They see it on Fox. They see it. This is an invasion like it's never been perpetrated with the media, because these people some of the media people are really reporting really what's going on at the border. We are totally in an invasion mode, okay? Nothing's actually being done, and these people they're dumping the people up. My sister told me they're dumping them right in Arizona and Phoenix. They don't have no place to put them. They dump them right on the street, Michael. They're living in parking lots and Home Depots, and I mean, it's 10 cities everywhere. It's insanity. And no state is a border. Every state is a border state, because every state's being invaded. And we know what's going on with Maine, Minnesota. It's insanity. And, Trump's trying to call them out. The media. Michael, my point is this. I've talked to you in the past about this, and I know you totally agree with me. Sanctuary cities is totally against the law.
Yes.
And why people are not being arrested for aiding and abetting and using sedation against this nation is unbelievable to me, that nobody's being arrested. I can't believe that our federal government is not arresting people for allowing this invasion of our country, and nobody's being called out on it. People should be arrested, put in jail. Michael, I live in South Florida, and I told you in the past, there's not one white male on the Miami-Dade County Commission. Broward County has 4 left. And if you don't tell me that's not an invasion of your country, I don't know what else you could call it. Now, I know what's going on in Michigan. I hear a lot's going on in Michigan with Sharia law. But I can tell you that every state now is a border state, Michael.
Yeah.
We totally have been invaded. The Democrats are doing this for the Electoral College. They're trying to annihilate the Electoral College, too. They want popular vote because they know there's 5 states will call the election every time. You would never even have a government if you go to get away from the Electoral College now. You would be in a civil war. This will be into a civil war if they keep this nonsense up. Their socialism, communist Bolshevikism. They're Bolsheviks. The Communist Party have taken over the Democratic Party, and they've turned them into Bolsheviks. That's exactly what's going on here. We see what's going on in Europe. You got, I think, in Germany. I heard that in Germany there's more mosques than there is churches, or it's close to being about even.
Yes.
Now, what's happened here is insane, Michael. President Trump is trying to stop this annihilation of the country. We won't have a country in the next 10 years. I can tell you that right now.
Well, that's the plan of the globalists. That's the plan of the globalists, the one world government, the new world order.
Interpol should go arrest him right away. George Soros should be arrested right now for trying to take down the government of the United States, our founding fathers. Michael, you know as well as I, these people are coming here now, they don't give a darn about our founding fathers. They don't care about our institution of government. They just want money because they never had nothing. They're lucky if they have a pot to put chicken in the pot, Michael. Okay?
Yes.
So they're coming here to invade this country, and they're not, Trump, I guess he said he's going to cut the money off to Central America. I don't know if that is a wise move, but, maybe it is. I don't know. He knows better than I would. But you know what? We're giving these governments all these millions of dollars, and they've taken our country over. It's just unbelievable to me that nothing's being done.
Well, again, the Democrats want the nation flooded with illegals who are going to vote Democratic, even though they're not supposed to vote. The globalists are just trying to blur all national borders and blend together all ethnic groups to simply erase, individual identity, regional identity, cultural identity, historical identity. They just want one teeming mob of humanity surrounding the entire planet. One planet, one global government, one private central bank, one slab of cement.
Well, Michael, in South Florida, they only have 3 radio stations in English. The other 12 are in Spanish. So if that's going to be the modus of operandi for the rest of the country, it's over. I mean, it's unbelievable because they're not coming here to asylumate either. They're not trying to take our culture. They're literally trying to keep their culture and run you out. Like in in the southwest part of the United States, they think that the whole region should be speaking Spanish, not English.
Yes, I remember seeing that when I lived in Los Angeles. When I lived in Los Angeles, they were still going on. There's, demanding that all the signage be in Spanish, and and the arguments were made on the basis of the historical heritage, the fact that in most of the parts of Los Angeles County, Hispanics were the majority population, and it was just this big fight going on back and forth. At one point, it was even suggested that we go bilingual the way Canada did over in Quebec, where every sign is in French and in English. But that suggestion was shot down simply because of the fiscal cost of replacing every single sign in LA County with a brand new one.
Michael, may I ask you one more thing, and then I know you got other callers. What would happen if Donald Trump were to issue an executive order that any Democrat that supported sanctuary cities was to be arrested? Would that ever be? Is that feasible? I mean, is it feasible to have these Democrats, even Rhino Republicans who support sanctuary cities? Is there a chance that they could be arrested for aiding and abetting, including the sedation of the nation?
Well, again, this is where we look to William Barr over at the Department of Justice, because they're the ones who are supposed to be issuing indictments. And if they're not issuing Title VIII indictments, then that tells us again, Barr is compromised, the Department of Justice is compromised. We have all these politicians running around breaking these laws, declaring sanctuary cities. All of these things are illegal, and yet nothing is being done. That all comes down from the very top. And Trump, again, was talking last week about shutting down the Mexico border completely, including all commerce. Then he backed off and said, well, we're going to give Mexico a year to get this under control. And the problem is just getting worse. You've got Ted Cruz out there now saying that if they were to close the border with Mexico, Texas would be economically destroyed, because apparently those illegal immigrants coming across the border, are bringing in millions of dollars of new revenue for the Texas economy. Actually, what I think the only thing that's positive for the economy, of course, is the drug trade. Exactly.
Right on. Mike, what would happen if Trump were an executive order where you were not to be able to send money back to Mexico, like remittances? Is that possible? He could do that, or no?
I thought that had already been attempted. The big problem is that the executive orders only are binding on the executive branch, and it's a complex mess. I think it would be great, because it's just another way this immigration problem is hemorrhaging the wealth of our nation, along with all of the wars and everything. This country economically is bleeding to death right now because of the wars, because of the immigration problem, because of Israel, and because of the trade wars. And Trump is surrounded by really bad advisors. And again, not to push it too hard, going back to that movie Vice, when you're watching how policy is being set, you get the sense these are all a bunch of frat boys. They knew each other in Yale and Harvard and whatever, and they're just out there blue skying this stuff, and they're not thinking it through. And it results in some very bad advice, which resulted in some very disastrous decisions being made. The same thing seems to be going on right now. Now, I don't recall where Trump went to college, but I do know he's surrounded by the same neocons who led George W. Bush down that primrose path. And that's another reason to be looking.
He went to
at
college in Pennsylvania, Michael. He went to Wharton.
Okay.
He went to college in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I believe it was.
But he's still surrounded by the same
Michael,
advisors, who are giving George
Right.
W. Bush all that bad info.
Right. It's unbelievable. You know, Michael, I did find one more thing. I got to go. 1.3 million people are working in agriculture. So what are these rest of these illegals doing, Michael? Because I looked it up. I wanted to know how many people are actually working in this country in agriculture for the whole lower 48 in agriculture. And from what I found, there's 1.3 million people working in agriculture. So if there's 26 million illegals here, what are these rest of these people doing? Cutting grass? What's going on?
I have no idea what they're doing. Probably a lot of them are collecting welfare and waiting to vote Democratic. This idea that we needed to bring in the illegals to harvest the crops is ridiculous because as the mom and pop farms disappear and the large corporate farms take over, the harvesting is done by machine. They don't need they don't need people out there with the short-handled hose, taking care of the gardens.
This is incredible what's happened in the United States over the last 30 years. It really is. It's incredible. And it all started, Michael, with that 1965 Kennedy Cuellar bullcrap bill in the 1965 immigration laws. That Kennedy should have been arrested for what he did, that criminal. I don't even go into that, but it's just unbelievable what's happened in this country. And you know, Michael, before you go, his brother John F. Kennedy would not even be a Democrat today. He couldn't even get into the Democratic Party.
Chad, you're right.
He wouldn't be able to run as a Democrat.
You're absolutely right. The Democratic Party has just gone so hard left. They would view Kennedy as a centrist, and that would be a bad thing.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, Michael, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much, Tom. And the phone lines are open again. Over at Judicial Watch, they announced yesterday they uncovered 422 pages of FBI documents that show evidence of discussions regarding a cover-up on Hillary Clinton's private email server with Platte River Networks. Now, remember, the story of the email server was originally it was set up in Hillary Clinton's home, and then when it started being made public that that's what was going on, the server was moved to Platte River Networks, which was not authorized to be running servers for the United States government. So the FBI documents are showing evidence of cover-up discussions regarding this, and they show Charles McCulloch, the Intel Community Inspector General, forwarding concerns about classified information found on then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's emails. And Judicial Watch also obtained Hillary Clinton's 2009 classified information non-disclosure agreement bearing her signature, which means she knew full well what she was doing was wrong. She can't come on out there and say, I had no idea. Yeah, she did. They make sure that you know. We got to take a break for commercials. Another caller waiting on the line. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And boy, the phone lines are filling up here. So let's go to Al in New Jersey. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi. I have a bone to pick with the previous caller, okay? I have to tell you the Cubans are white. The Cubans came into work. They don't take welfare. They built up South Florida. It was depressed. And they're also the same culture as the U.S., white, Western, and Roman Catholic. That's all I have to say.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that correction, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Pete in Arkansas. Aloha, Pete. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, it's actually Pete in Alaska. I think you got the wrong.
Oh, I'm sorry, Pete in Alaska. My bad eyes, no cookie.
Yeah, okay, listen, okay. I want to point out 10 minutes ago or so about how AOC got to be in that position. She seems to be out of her class. Well, let me just give you a tip. There's a couple of very good documentaries online. All you got to do is type in "the brains behind AOC" in quotes on YouTube.
I just put those
the
two up.
brains
I just
behind
put them up at
AOC.
whatreallyhappened.com.
And, pardon me?
I just put them up at whatreallyhappened.com. They're already posted.
Oh, good. Well, there you go. We might like to talk about it. She was picked up in a casting call competition for people to play candidates for election, and apparently she was just one of 7 who were picked. And this same group, run by Cenk Uygur of Young Turks, they have a plan to fill the whole Congress with their own people, with their own players. Okay? So it's quite a sweeping scheme they've got going. That's it.
They're very well organized, but again, we have a story a little further down where Cortez's opponent in the primaries made a bad strategic decision.
Yeah, well, that's another point. But the point is, there's a scheme going on to find people in a casting competition and put them up and fill Congress with them, and they're just following orders.
How do you think we
They're
got
people
Reagan?
Who are, just dummies who are being coached. We kind of got a government behind the government.
Well, like I said, how do you think we got Reagan? He was an actor, and yes, he'd been president of the Screen Actors Guild, and yes, he'd been governor of California, but by the time he got to the White House, he was already starting to suffer from Alzheimer's. So he was just a front man for George Herbert Walker Bush.
But that wasn't as organized as this. This is something now. That was way back then. There's probably another example of this similar thing, but this is now, and this is very well organized, and they've got a plan to take over the whole Congress.
Okay, well, Pete, we're going to have to let you go and take a station identification break, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go back to the phones. Stuart in Miami, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hi, Mike. You were talking about last week, after all these years, not a lot's been done. And I think that there's been a tendency, I think, of a lot of people to think that it's just a matter of, well, you just educate enough and you just, you put out enough news and it'll magically happen. And it seems to me that not enough is discussed about how do we get to, let's say, how do we get to power, so to speak? What strategies will work? And I think on the national level, it's been closed for a long time. I mean, I think the assassinations of the 60s and right up to Reagan showed that.
Yes.
So it seems to me the discussion has to begin at the local level. And then, of course, you have, the scummy politicians here also. But it may not be quite as bad, but you never know until you see what you can do. But I think it's going to have to come down to a regional breakup. And maybe sometime later on, maybe the country could be united again into one country. But I think a regional breakup would give enough control on the local level and avoid some of these the worst of the scummy politicians.
Well, they did try that once before, back in the 1860s. The value of getting on out there and trying to educate people. Our government is a master at dividing the population against itself. Men against women, young against old, gays against straight, keeping us all, flustered about what restroom we're supposed to be using, just all that kind of nonsense. And the reason they do it is to just keep us, turned against each other. And if we can reach out to the public and say, look, we're all Americans, and let's start acting like it instead of acting like, oh, we're going to be our little group over here and our little group over here sneering at the other ones back and forth, and start to pull the American people together as a single united American people. And at that point, we become a political force. We succeeded in doing it in part back in 2016. That's what shocked everybody. Okay, Hillary Clinton was the anointed one. She was supposed to be the president. And Trump's supporters all pulled together from all different walks of life and they put him over the top. And that's what just freaked everybody out in the deep state.
Right. But the problem is even if he's a good guy, Trump, the power's not there. You know, so what's the alternative source of power to enforce? And I don't think it's going to be on the national level. I think that situation would have to occur regionally. And I hate to say it, but I think you're going to have regional or local militias, if for no other reason than defense. And
well, I mean,
I don't
certainly
see, how do you enforce the power?
The states have their own militias, which is called the National Guard. I do not advocate any kind of violence, nor do I think it's a good idea, because if there's one thing this government is really good at doing, it's killing people who stand up to power. But I still am convinced that in the long term, the United States federal government is looking at a Soviet-style collapse. And we're just going to have to wait because the country's running out of money. They can't bring any new wealth in. The more they print up new dollars to fund the war machine, the more other countries are turning away from it. We're not doing well with the wars. We got stalled in Syria. We got stalled in Afghanistan. We're still in Iraq, but the Iraqis want us to leave. And we're getting less and less respect and cooperation from other nations around the world to maintain these agendas. And right now in Venezuela, as just one example, it looks like there is now a stalemate between the United States, China, and Russia. So this plan they had to reassert the U.S. empire, to me, it looks like it's staggering. It's not doing very well at all. And again, I can't advocate violence. If I thought violence was going to work, I would. I don't think it's going to.
No,
and I don't want to think about...
I'm not advocating.
Well, the instant you start talking about militias, you're talking about the potential of violence.
Well, they may visit it upon you first. So, I mean, as a defensive measure, it might be worth considering. But if not that, the idea of, as a slogan or whatever you want to call it, of keeping more of the money at the state level, emphasizing the waste that you're talking about right now, might be a way to try to strangle the vampire and deprive them of the blood money that they need to keep going.
Well, unfortunately, once they were able to say that ink and paper was money, they've got the printing presses.
Yeah.
And we're just going to have to wait for the we're going to have to wait for the crash, and it is coming. We know it's coming. Bubbles are popping all over the place.
Well, let me leave you one other thing. There's a very good article on the current state of the United States. It's called Mr. MAGA and the Decline of Western Civilization. And it's on the site. I don't know if you're familiar with the Saker.
Yes.
It's on the Saker. It's a very good article, and it talks about parallels with the Soviet Union.
What's the name of the article again?
I'll leave you with that. It's called Mr. MAGA and the Decline of Western Civilization.
Okay. I think I did see that once before, but I'm going to read it again because I also see many parallels between our current government and the former Politburo. We're sort of like Washington, D.C. has become like the Kremlin, only with a lot more screeching people in it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Mike. Have a good show. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to Art Off the Grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, just wanted to, since the comment about Trump in his college days, I wanted to shed a little light for those who might be curious about the truth about Trump and his college experience. He originally, in 1964, he enrolled at Fordham University, which is a Catholic diocese of New York, founded in 1841. Mm-hmm. It's the oldest Catholic in northeastern United States, the third oldest university in New York, and the only Jesuit university in the city of New York. Now, Trump enrolled there in 1964. After 2 years, he transferred to Wharton School in Pennsylvania. He graduated in May of 1968 with a BS in economics. Now, a lot of people out there will tell you that Trump graduated with honors, he was top student, blah, 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 blah. Here is the truth. He would like you to think he was top honors and all that, but his classmates actually say that's not the case. In fact, in 1968, the Daily Pennsylvanian published a list of 56 students who were on Wharton's dean's list that year. Trump's name is not anywhere on that list. According to a man by the name Stephen Foxman, who is a 1968 Wharton graduate, he said he recognized virtually all the names on the list, but Trump's name was not one of them. Now, I've got an actual copy of the 1968 Wharton graduate program.
Yeah.
And it gives a list of 20 Wharton awards. There were 15 how do you pronounce that? Cum laude recipients.
Cum laude.
Magna cum laude recipients, and 2 summa cum laude recipients. Trump's name, nowhere on this list. Now, if he was everything he claimed to be, and he graduated top honors, his name would be on that list. But it was not. There's a little bit of Trump history.
Well, let's back up here a little bit, because the magna cum laude and summa cum laude relate to your overall GPA, your grade point average, and it's sort of a bar. But there are other honors in the educational system, and so at this point,
of the 56 students on the dean's list, Trump's name is nowhere in there. So he did not graduate top of his class. If he had, he would have been on that list.
Okay, it does bear looking into. But the question is,
I've got
hang on. If there was an issue there, why didn't the Democrats exploit it in 2016?
Who knows? Maybe they didn't catch it.
Oh, man, they had a lot of people digging into Donald Trump's past.
Well, you know, there were several TV reports which talked about his great achievements in college. No one ever called him out on it. No one ever called him out on it. You have to kind of wonder why. They only call out those things that they seem are necessary to serve their purpose.
True.
But if he had graduated top of his class on the dean's list, why does his name not appear there?
Okay, well,
I've got a copy of the actual
I understand what you're saying. Art, I understand what you're saying. Okay, here's my problem. Okay, I don't know exactly what Trump claimed about his educational experience, and that makes it a little bit harder to evaluate what we're talking about here. Anyway, Art, I'm running out of time, and I got a lot of news to get through, so thank you very much, and we're going to let you go here, and the phone lines are open again. All right, we've talked about this before, but it's worth mentioning again. Over in Russia, Konstantin Kulyk, the deputy head of the Prosecutor General's International Legal Cooperation Department, says they have information, they have evidence on the Democrats and what they were doing in 2016. And they want to get over and present it to the U.S. government, but they're being denied visas. They're being blocked. Now, this supposedly, at least right now, is Donald Trump's State Department. What is their justification for not allowing these Russian officials to come on over here? Well, because Russia's the enemy. That may be the justification for it right now. Okay, Devin Nunes, as you know, he's filed or is about to file 24 criminal referrals regarding individuals within this Mueller investigation. And again, this will put the burden on Attorney General William Barr, because it'll be up to Barr to decide whether or not there will be an indictment and a prosecution. And if Barr gets these 24 referrals and sits on them, then we know that we have yet another in a long series of corrupt, obstructionist attorney generals. But Devin Nunes is not done. He's just filed a $150 million lawsuit against McClatchy News alleging conspiracy. So he's definitely out there loaded for bear. Okay, this is the article I was mentioning on before. How Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez beat Joe Crowley during the primary season. According to a new book, The Hill They Die On, and this is written by political reporters Jake Sherman and Anna Palmer, Joe Crowley's campaign had some serious dirt on Ocasio-Cortez, but he chose not to use it because he thought it would make him look like he was weak. So Crowley had plenty of fodder he could have used against Ocasio-Cortez, but his top New York campaign operatives decided just take the punches and don't hit back, just appear that you're on the high ground. And Crowley didn't want to get dirty. He thought it would be a sign of weakness in this tight race against Ocasio-Cortez. He was supposed to be the next Democratic leader, not to someone who had to fight for re-election. So, as you know, Ocasio-Cortez stunned the Democratic political establishment when she ousted Crowley last June, which resulted in an almost guaranteed seat in Congress. She easily rolled over Republican opponent Anthony Pappas in November with 78% of the vote, and that's how she got on in. Crowley messed up. His advisors messed up. Barack Obama has a reputation for self-referential speeches. For Obama, giving a speech is the presidential equivalent of a vanity license plate, and he set a new record. In his latest speech, he apparently referred to himself no fewer than 467 times during his Saturday lecture in Berlin, including more than 300 instances of I. A little bit of an ego there. And speaking of ego, I guess Alec Baldwin is getting tired of playing the president over on Saturday Night Live. He's apparently out there on social media doing an informal poll saying, should he actually run for president? And he says that if he does in 2020, that it would be easy to defeat Donald Trump. Alec, you're an actor. You're a good one, but you're an actor. Story coming on out of the Washington Times here about how the media pulled off a big con with the Russia collusion story. We need to keep this alive. We need to get this out before the eyes of the American people. Just get them to stop watching the Kardashians for a few seconds and say, look, you got lied to for 2 years. It was one giant lie. House Democratic leaders, Senate Democrats running for president, to the Senate Republican who reported the whole thing to the first place, to the roaring lions of the great white media, everybody knew it was a lie, and it's important the American people know that it's a lie, along with Saddam's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas. So now that the Russian collusion bubble has burst, what's going to happen? Well, we know that the liberals are crying so hard it's flooded out the Midwest and wiped out all those crops. But the media is still out there. And apparently Time magazine has their latest cover out there. And the cover story is called Russia's Other Plot. And the cover's got this usual cliche Soviet-inspired scary red and black artwork. And so Time magazine's attitude is, well, forget about the Russia collusion story. Okay, that didn't work out. But there's another one. There's another Russian plot that involves Donald Trump. And we've got to go after that one. not too long ago, there was a documentary that came out about the late singer Michael Jackson. And it created a sensation. It was called Leaving Neverland. And it was immediately picked up by the hashtag #MeToo movement as saying, see, there's all this abuse going on. And nobody is questioning Michael Jackson's leanings. That was kind of an open secret here. But apparently there have been some problems that have showed up within the documentary. And there were apparently 2 individuals who were the focus of this documentary. One of them was called, his name was Safe Chuck. And he claimed he was abused in the train station at Jackson's Neverland. The problem is, and the building permits prove it, the train station didn't begin construction until about a year after Safe Chuck said the abuse ended. So, responding to comments on Twitter, director Reed, who made this documentary or mockumentary, at first appeared to admit the dates in the documentary were wrong. Then he backtracked and insisted there was no clash of dates. So, Leaving Neverland, grain of salt time here. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Let's welcome back to the show here. The phone lines are open at 800-313-9443. Let's talk about some of the economic news now. Over in Russia, as you're probably already aware, they are masters of sailing in Arctic waters. They build the world's best icebreakers. Some of them are nuclear powered. And they have invested quite a bit of money basically opening up this Arctic sea route. And the Russian Minister of National Resources and Environment, Dmitry Kobilkin, said cargo shipping in Russia's northernmost territorial waters will exceed 80 million tons as soon as 2024. Now, of course, they're going to have to be dealing with the fact that global warming isn't really working out and Arctic ice is going to be encroaching. But apparently the Russian government is going to be investing a lot of money for infrastructure to keep that shipping route open. Now, the big question is going to be, will it be able to compete with China's One Belt, One Road? Certainly, it is a much shorter shipping route to get from Russia to Europe than to go down around the long way. And that's the reason that Russia has done this. Simply manufacturing or growing the products is only half the process. Getting it to market is the other half. And the faster you get it to market, the fresher it's going to be, the more in demand it's going to be. Meanwhile, Russia continues to dump U.S. dollars and buying gold as a safety metal. Apparently, they bought 1 million ounces in February, the most since last November. So in the last 10 years, Russia has quadrupled its bullion reserves. Last year was the most ambitious year yet. Okay, so Donald Trump is out there talking about more tariffs. $11 billion worth of tariffs aimed at the European Union's aircraft, meaning Airbus, cheese, and wine. And a lot of this is tangled up with what's going to happen with Brexit. So the IMF is out there saying the global trading order is under threat. And yeah, it's definitely showing signs of strain. But I can understand why he wants a tariff on European Union aircraft. Boeing's in trouble. Their stock is way down. Orders are being canceled. That goof with the 737 MAX, that was just dumb. First of all, to stick those engines out forward into the airflow where they're going to destabilize the way the plane flies. And then that bad software in the anti-stall system coupled with a lack of pilot training. That's the cascade right there. Now you've got those older 787s over in China had to be grounded because of a problem with the GPS system. Over in Great Britain, and this tells you how skewed the system is, how biased it is. The British gas chief just got a 44% pay raise to £2.4 million per year, despite British Gas axing 4,000 jobs, losing more than 700,000 customers, and hiking bills for millions. Gee, I wish I could work at a job where I got promoted and rewarded for messing up that bad. And more bad news for Trump before he starts implementing those other tariffs on the wine and the cheese and the EU aircraft. The U.S. trade deficit continues to soar despite the Trump tariffs. And the talk of new tariffs, of course, are being sharply criticized by EU officials. And Airbus said it saw no legal basis for Washington's move and warned of deepening transatlantic trade tensions. Well, at the risk of being nationalist here, at least in the case of tariffs against Airbus, we are prepared to sort of step in with a domestic product, assuming Boeing can clean up its act. But all of these various governments, they're desperate for money. This country has been bankrupted by the money junkies, by the wars plural, by the illegal immigrant problems. So all the governments are going on tax binges. They want to tax everything. California now wants to tax soda, tires, guns, water, pain pills, lawyers, car batteries, more than they already are. And that's why people who are making $300,000 a year are still struggling to live in San Francisco. This country is being taxed into collapse. We just don't have it. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back to the phone, somebody just sent me this article out of the Daily Caller that apparently George Soros's media network helped Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez win her seat. So here we have Soros again playing around with our government like...
the POTUS and the actor. You've seen The Matrix, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, you remember when Cypher is doing the deal with the Smith agent, and he says, "I want to get back in. I don't want to remember anything."
Yep.
You could type in your browser, "Ignorance is bliss."
Yes.
He says, "I want to be somebody important." First he says, "I want to be rich," and then he says, "I want to be somebody important, like an actor." And then the Smith agent says, "Whatever you want, Mr. Reagan." So, wasn't Trump an actor? Wasn't he part of the WWF? Didn't he have to get on the Screen Actors Guild to be on there? And
no, that was Reagan. No, that was Reagan, not Trump.
No, Trump was also Reagan was on the WWF. It was do a search for Donald Trump beating up the guy who owned the WWF. Now it's called the WWE. Okay,
Trump would have to have been a member of AFTRA for his reality TV show. I think. I mean, I'm wondering how that works. I don't know that he's actually a member of Screen Actors Guild. And outside of his reality TV show, it's not like Trump has ever pursued anything that could be construed as an acting career.
Yeah, but he's been an actor all his life. I mean, seriously. I mean, just like it. Well, we all can volunteer. We make all these claims that it's out.
I never signed any kind of a contract to be, following any orders or paying any bills.
Yeah, It's like Mark Stevens says. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He says it's men and women offering you goods and services out of the barrel of a gun.
Yep.
So I just want to leave you with that thought. I just wanted to insert that little matrix thing. You know, it's all around us, Mike. It's kind of neat to be alive today, isn't it?
You know,
by the way,
I kind of miss a more innocent.
I mean, that's when people were moral, you know, and they wanted to protect their child's innocence as long as we could.
Or maybe it was just that the evils of the world were better hidden back then.
Exactly. I mean, those Freemasons they were real moral men, but they were still doing evil behind the scenes, you know.
Well,
it was
some
the higher up.
Some were, some weren't. It's like any other organization. Right. There are going to be some bad people inside there. Again, we used to have a neighbor, he's since passed on, who was master of the local temple, and we were invited to several events down there, and he actually invited me to become a Mason, but I had to turn him down because to be a Mason, you have to profess belief in a universal architect, and I was not going to dishonor him by professing a belief I do not actually have. But we stayed friends, and as far as I could tell, at least within this particular lodge, it was a little more than a gentleman's, you know, social club.
Yeah. By the way, Mike, look up oregano T-73. That's like the thing you should hit. As soon as you get a sniffle, you put like 6 to 10 drops under your tongue. It's wonderful. Yeah.
And old age.
Yeah, I'll keep you in my thoughts.
All right, well, thank you. Hopefully, I appreciate it. We're going to let you go, and we're getting close to the end of the show here, so let me get some news here because I'm way behind on the talking points. Okay, apparently Iran has sent a delegation to Venezuela to discuss opening up direct flight routes so that there'll be passenger flights, cargo flights from Iran to Venezuela. And apparently they arrived yesterday to discuss direct flights between the two countries. And of course, Iran supports President Nicolas Maduro against the opposition backed by most Western countries. So a plane belonging to Mahan Air, a private Iranian airline, accused by the West of transporting military equipment to Middle East war zones, landed in Caracas on Monday. Ooh, bad Iranians, bad Iranians. And a White House official said the U.S. government viewed the launch of direct flights as a politically motivated gesture. Maybe. But on the other hand, if the sea lanes of communication are cut off and there's, you know, all these blockades, you know, air cargo flights are going to be the only way to get stuff in and out. Talking about immigration here, apparently we are now seeing more than 100,000 illegal immigrants caught every month. And it raises the question, how many got through who were not caught? Where did they go? Who is supporting them? Who's paying for them? Go. Which, to me, would make sense. But apparently the judge stopped the program the government planned to expand to stem the recent flood of migrants. The ruling is slated to take effect this Friday, according to the order by U.S. District Judge Richard Seaborg in San Francisco. Yes, the heart of liberalism. And the preliminary injunction will be applied nationwide. So there is this incredible New World Order democratic machine that is trying to keep our borders open. And if it harms us economically, too bad. If we're seeing diseases come on in, too bad. No price is too great to pay for millions and millions of new democratic voters and for the rise of the one world government. Now, we mentioned this one before during a phone call, but President Donald Trump and his administration have decided to, and the White House argued that the Cuban Baseball Federation was part of the Cuban government, which caused the deal to be nullified because trade with Cuba is currently banned. How petty they can be. And here's the part that really bothers me. These Cuban ball players, these are the kind of immigrants we want. Highly skilled, in demand. They're going to help stimulate our economy. These are good people, and they're being kept out. Meanwhile, we've got drug dealers and MS-13 just pouring across the borders in Arizona and Texas. What is wrong with this picture? Alrighty, the European Union is now saying they're ready to grant Britain a second Brexit delay, but only if British Prime Minister Theresa May comes up with a clear plan of how to ratify the stalled divorce deal in the overtime. Well, it's still a stall, because what Europe wants out of the Brexit deal is not what Parliament and the British people want out of it. Meanwhile, apparently a Tory minister literally was begging Macron and Merkel, reject another delay. Let's just get this over with. Please put us out of our misery. But it looks like it may not happen because Britain is getting ready to host EU elections in May. Now, those elections were not supposed to happen in Great Britain because Brexit was supposed to have happened by now. But somebody somewhere thinks, hey, it's going to happen. And so they're getting ready to have the EU elections in Great Britain. And going on the premise of if at first you don't succeed, try again, or to be more accurate, keep on holding the vote until you get the result you want. Theresa May is considering having yet another vote on a second referendum. Now, Parliament has already shot that down and said there will be no second referendum. So what's Theresa May going to do? Lock the Parliament doors and say you don't get to go to the bathroom until I get my second referendum? Because that's how childish it's getting. Now, behind it all, there's another aspect, and it's called the Ruxit. And there is this Council of Europe, to which Russia is currently has a delegation with limited rights because of the frictions going on between the East and the West. But there is talk of simply forcing Russia out of the Council of Europe completely. And if so, it will have disastrous consequences for Europe. This according to the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Thorbjorn Jagland. And he says, I don't believe many people understand what a blow it will be for Europe if we get Brexit and Ruxit at the same time. And what's really interesting, at least they're being honest about this. They're saying that the rights of the Russian delegation in the Parliamentary Assembly were limited following Russia's reunification with Crimea. At least they're not doing that old canard about, annexation. Russia stole Crimea. They're just saying reunification, which is exactly what it was, and that's what the Crimean people voted for. Ahead of the coming EU elections in May, Europe's right-wing populists are uniting behind Salvini. And they're talking about a new alliance with the goal of becoming the strongest faction in the European Parliament. And they want to be able to radically influence EU policies on security, migration, family values, and the environment. Now, there's only one problem with that. The European Parliament doesn't really have that much control over the European Union. They can hold votes, and they can send the results of those votes onto the European Commission. But it is the European Commission that makes the final decision what's going to happen. Over in France, a little bit of good news for the Yellow Vests. The Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, is now calling for quick tax cuts in response to the anger expressed by the Yellow Vest protesters. See, it can work. You get out there in the streets in enough numbers. So it worked over there. All right, getting into the world of political correctness. Kyle Korver, who's a player for the NBA's Utah Jazz, wrote an op-ed for the Players Tribune, basically saying that, yes, indeed, white people are responsible for the sins of their forefathers. This is setting the stage for reparations or for white guilt, both of which I reject. I refuse to accept responsibility for events that happened before I was born. I refuse to accept responsibility for events that are obviously outside of my personal control. And I think this idea of reparations, of taking money away from people who were never slave owners to give to money who were never slaves, is utterly ridiculous. It is political pandering of the shameless degree. Now, my ancestors were never slave owners. In fact, if you look at the actual numbers, the actual percentage of people who owned slaves, even in the Deep South, was very small. I think it was something like between 2 and 3%. So you can't run around and say, we're all descended from slave owners. No. In my case, my ancestors lived in the North, in New Hampshire. And one of them ran a station on the Underground Railroad, helping escaped slaves get to Canada. Now, what do you think would happen if I went up to Canada and I knocked on the door of the descendants of those slaves that my ancestors helped to escape, and I demanded compensation? I'd be laughed off the porch, and rightly so. I was not there at the time. Had I been there, I probably would have helped, but I wasn't. Now, a lot of people have been very, very concerned about how over at Amazon there seems to be a lot of book banning going on. There's a clear crackdown on free speech and free thought across the internet. The First Amendment is being ignored on the basis that these are private companies and they can choose who they do business with. This, of course, coming from the same liberals who just go hysterical when a baker refuses to make a gay wedding cake. But apparently in the case of Amazon, most of the book bannings are the result of Jewish lobbyists like the ADL, who are going into Amazon and saying, you can't let that book be seen. That book cannot be seen. So, now the good news is, if anything can come of it, the Senate is convening hearings on Google and Facebook censorship of conservatives. They're at least going to put these guys in the hot seat and grill them a little tiny bit. The big problem is that the way these social media platforms are legally defined is what exempts them from the First Amendment. If they were defined as social media, which is what they call themselves, by the way, if they were defined as media, the First Amendment would apply. Now, GOP Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri has put Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey on notice that they're going to call for a third-party audit of Twitter over deplatforming bias. They're going to start basically pulling it all out and making it public that, yes, social media, at least the big ones, Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter, are filtering what you see. That, I think, is probably going to drive a lot of people to non-filtered media. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back with our last segment. And aloha, America. Welcome to our show here, and the last segment of our program today. Apparently, over in Israel, both Gantz and Netanyahu are claiming victory. They're still saying that it is way too close to call. Meanwhile, up in the state of Maine, that little warm spell that they had that had all the global warming people saying, see, that's gone. And snow has returned to Maine. And it's not just there. There's a major storm forming over the central U.S., Winter Storm Wesley. And winter storm watches have been posted from central Montana to southwest Minnesota. More are expected. This is going to be a bad one, and they're saying it's going to be another bomb cyclone that'll bring more flooding to parts of the Midwest that were hit by the so-called 1,000-year flood last month Well, it looks like it's another 1,000 years has already passed. Same thing over in Crete. Major flooding, streets are turning into raging rivers. And it's because the infrastructure is being neglected. Everybody's spending all their money on the bankers and on war. Over in the House of Representatives, the Oversight Committee, they're having a hearing on the subject of climate change, and it got into a little bit of a tiff between Republican Representative Thomas Massie and former Secretary of State John Kerry. And during a contentious moment, the Kentucky congressman asked Kerry about the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And Massie pointed out that right now carbon dioxide levels are currently lower than the average amount that has been present since mammals have existed on planet Earth. But Kerry came on out and said, yeah, but we weren't walking the planet. And came on out and said CO2 levels are the highest they've been in the past 800,000 years. And basically they went back and forth. Kerry wound up looking really bad. Massie, of course, is a graduate of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and unusual for a member of Congress, he knows what he's talking about. There was this green energy company called Montria that turned out to be the biggest clean energy scam in American history. It was a Ponzi, $54 billion lost. And what made it really kind of interesting is the fraudsters were honored by former President Bill Clinton in a 2009 ceremony for the Clinton Global Initiative before the scam came on out. So the only green that came on out were of course, all those dollar bills. A lot of people lost their life savings on that. And getting on back here, this is kind of an interesting little story. Apparently over at that, oh, there's the music. All right, well, I'll save it until tomorrow. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of things to share with you. Please take what you learn here at Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com. Share it with everyone that you know. Really start reminding everybody that for the last 2 years, Democrats and the entire corporate media were lying about Trump-Russia collusion. And how could we possibly ever trust them about anything else again? If then somebody says it was only the one time, say, oh, you really think Saddam had nuclear weapons? It's time to really go head-to-head with the corporate media. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.